Good day, everyone, and welcome to this insightful educational webinar hosted by the International Trade Council. It's my pleasure to be your host today. I am Anne. Before we proceed, could you please confirm via chat if you can clear us or if you can clear me and if the visuals are properly displayed? So let's take a brief moment to ensure everything is working perfectly. So, can you hear me okay, John?
Yes, I can hear you fine. Yeah.
Okay. So, let me start the introduction. Thank you for everyone who attended this webinar. So today we delve into a critical topic, managing supply chain cost in an uncertain world. We will explore why robust supply chains are essential to some businesses, discuss strategies to navigate current challenges in supply chain management, share ideas on reducing operational costs, and consider planning scenarios looking forward to the next 12 months. We are honored to have John Kinghorn, Partnership Director at IFX Payment, as our esteemed presenter. John brings a wealth of knowledge and experience that will surely benefit us all. Without further ado, I would like to hand over the virtual stage to John.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And thank you to the International Trade Council for the opportunity today to just have a little conversation around sort of global supply chains, look at the current outlook on the supply chains. Obviously, there's different facets involved in that, and just have a look around some of the maybe challenges out there and ways that businesses can potentially face those challenges and manage their costs within the supply chain as effectively and efficiently as possible. And as I said, it's great to have this opportunity today to look at global supply chains. And I hope you all come out of this webinar with some valuable information which can aid potentially in your professional lives. Just in terms of the presentation itself, obviously put together a few slides and sort of estimated that the probably presentation may last around 20 to 25 minutes and potentially got some time at the end for some questions as well. So just to start off, just a bit about me and my background first. So my career started back in 2005. And a big focus for me throughout my career has been supporting, helping, and assisting internationally trading businesses as they look to expand. So those could be businesses at a startup or scale up stage, and those could be also mature businesses or large corporate institutions. And a big part of my role has been helping them on their growth journeys, managing some of the complexities of global trade. And a big focus of that has been strategies to help reduce any costs along that process, particularly around the currency or international payment side. Just on the slide here, I put sort of the company I'm representing, IFX Payments. I put the URL there if anyone would like to take a look. And I've also put my LinkedIn handle and email address. And I appreciate with sometimes on these presentations or webinars or even seminars, feel free to reach out to me at any point if you've got any questions around any of the content, or if you just want to chat around some things that may be connected to some of the topics that we're covering today. So just to start off, I always think it's worthwhile just sometimes taking a step back. And certainly my approach when doing webinars or seminars or talks is to look at things at relative high level, because I appreciate people who are maybe watching today could come across various industries across the world. They could be in numerous different roles. Some may be directly involved in the supply chain, some may not, or some may just be taking a keen interest. So appreciate that some of the information may be sort of that high level. Obviously, some of the topics could be sector agnostic, depending on what industry or sector that you're involved in. But I certainly hope that some of the information will be useful for you as a sort of takeaway. And just to start off with like that definition piece, I put a couple of definitions on here around the supply chain. So supply chain is an entire system that encompasses the product and delivery of a product or service from the start or outset. So, for example, this could be from the actual sourcing of the raw materials that are needed to make or generate that product or be able to deliver a service. And it's all the way to the very end to actually delivering or being able to sell that to an end user. The second side of the definition says that supply chain is the backbone of modern commerce, connecting suppliers, manufacturers, distributors, retailers, and customers in a complex network that ultimately drives economic growth and prosperity. And I guess the point here is that most buyers, quite understandably, don't think about how goods and services are sourced or manufactured. Consumers and everyone on this call, most likely, you just want to buy something there and then as and when you need to. However, supply chain management, as we'll come on to, is a critical component for any business success. And it's important for that very reason is that good supply chain management and the factors can affect the supply chain can have a big impact on a company's operating expenses. And like for most businesses, they will be judged or measured on profitability. So that expense or cost that goes in supply chain, it's real important that that can be managed as effectively as possible. And I think we have, over the last sort of 10, 20 years, we're living in a more obviously increasingly global connected world. So that combination of resources, materials, manufacturing, transportation, and shipping all works together to create the supply chain. So we touched upon it there in the definitions then. So what can go into the sort of typical supply chain? And we talked about the start of the process. So that could be from sourcing raw materials themselves. And then at some point in the journey, those materials are then transported to suppliers. Then obviously you've got the role of the manufacturer to actually refine and process raw materials actually into finished products. And then you come on to other factors such as distribution and retail about the selling of the products and kind of that feedback loop encompassing all those different stages of the journey. And then again, we'll come on to this a bit later, but within the supply chain, and we've got obviously the example later on in this presentation around COVID, but the supply and the demand and how that factors and how that can be challenging to some businesses involved in the supply chain about trying to forecast or look at supply and obviously changing demand as well, depending on what's going on in the wider economic environment. So why is supply chain important? Well, supply chain, we're obviously going to look at it from the business side, but supply chain is important to everyone. So from consumers to businesses, because ultimately the products that fuel everyday life, from the clothes that we're wearing today to roofs that go above our properties, to chips that power electronic devices, this all stems, or the supply chain has a part within all of this. And businesses ultimately can source materials, or some businesses can source materials worldwide. So what does this allow? This allows a wider pool potentially of resources. And I think if you look at the example of going into a restaurant and ordering your food, sometimes having too much choice can actually be sort of make it more difficult to work out what you want. Whereby in the example of this, generically speaking, having more choice for a business can potentially provide you with different value, whether that's from suppliers to even sort of the raw materials to the generation side. I think having that more choice can put you in a more powerful position in some circumstances. So if you're discussing with suppliers, again, if you're not reliant just on one supplier, but having more choice, again, you could potentially get yourself better deals. So it's just to look at that sort of overall encompassing approach. Connected to that, expanding markets as well. So supply chain can allow businesses to expand, and sometimes once domestic coverage has been utilized and you're seeing traction and trajectory and sufficient growth in your domestic markets, supply chains can allow businesses to expand overseas. So that can increase revenues and the knock-on effect to increase profitability as well. And then meeting customer demand as well. So if demand is there and sustained, then it allows businesses to maximize and match that demand. So it's a very key point. It's like opportunity when you're looking at that sort of SWOT analysis. If you see there's an opportunity there, if you can match that opportunity and fulfilling it, then potentially the knock-on effect to your business will be extremely positive. And just one last point around sort of supply chain, when you're looking at start to end and processes and efficiencies, an optimized supply chain can potentially provide a competitive advantage for your business. Most businesses may be operating in a competitive or even saturated market where there's lots of competitors offering similar products or services. So if you can offer really competitive or even better pricing, faster delivery times, and higher product quality compared to your competitors, then that's going to put you in a really good position to sort of beat some of your competition and making sure you're capturing a lot of that market or that opportunity. So we're sort of covering here some of the sort of why supply chain is important. And as I said, we will come on to some of these a bit more in detailed depth as we go through the presentation. So what's the current outlook? And again, just looking at quite a general approach here, just some of the key factors that have been and continue to affect global supply chains. And I appreciate we're going over all ground in some of this, but we're going to start off on COVID-19 and the impact and the lasting impact of the pandemic. As we very well know, COVID-19 created a global tangle of disruption for many businesses, aside from the individual disruption it caused. As we know, and as we look back, vaccinations or the introduction of vaccinations lessen the severity of the virus and lockdowns to a degree. However, the supply chain logjam became particularly twisted in early 2022. COVID variants were discovered, and then with a combined war erupting in Eastern Europe, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, this was not a good mix for many businesses in that business environment. So what impact did this have? Well, these factors led to production and transportation issues in both food and energy supply chains specifically. This initially resulted in supply challenges, and also due to the shortage of supply, also higher prices. And whenever there's an increase in supplies, inflationary pressures are felt in many global economies. So we started seeing the trend of higher inflation felt in many global economies. And the impact of these events, as we know, cannot be understated. And whilst we're seeing a slow return to more normal times, particularly in some inflation levels, when events like these come along, ultimately, like COVID, you can view it like a cut. The deeper the cut is, the longer it takes for things to get back to normal. There's no quick fix, unfortunately, so recovery times takes longer. And I think the COVID-19 pandemic underscored the importance of having resilient supply chains. Clearly, it was a freak event in terms of no one was talking about a pandemic coming along and what was actually going to happen. However, businesses with complex supply chains were hit especially hard because of restrictions, lockdowns, having to shut operations and sending workforces homes. There was also borders closed internationally, which prevented raw materials and product shipments from entering countries. Consumers were stuck at home for periods of time unexpectedly. This also led to knock-on effect on buying habits as well. So you had the both sides of supply and demand being hit. And one example, which people may remember on the call having a factor, was the issues and challenges around toilet paper. To put this in perspective, at the time, the White House estimated that stay-home orders caused a 40% increase in demand for retail toilet paper. And clearly, from a supply and demand perspective, this was close to impossible to satisfy much. That's why you saw empty supermarkets, and the ability to get toilet paper was really difficult. This wasn't just felt in sort of when you're looking at toilet paper, there was other knock-on effects from manufacturing to housing. There was big challenges and problems and issues around those just due to supply and demand. And I think when you look at the lockdown, just sort of final few points on that, I think you look at multinational companies as well, particularly in China, like Apple, with assembly plants in Shanghai, were totally hammered. Amazon as well. And I think China sort of estimated, I think in 2022, quarter two, there was a sort of loss, or wasn't a realization of around 4 billion in revenues for Apple alone out of that. And as I said, backlogs to get reduced and cleared up, it takes 6 to 12 months due to shutdowns there. And again, when we say supply chain and COVID, There's clearly a shipping logistics factor as well about the movement of goods as well. So from creation, generation, raw materials, um, products and services being actually created, there was a massive slowdown to a complete stoppage in some areas. We talked about it a little bit onto the next point around high cost inflation environment. So what does a high cost inflation environment mean for supply chain and businesses involved? Well, this means cost of materials, transportation and labor, and inputs required for production all increase. So that cost of doing business automatically increased. And we're certainly seeing some of those, not all, are struggling to get down to more low, normal levels. And even cost of manufacturing and distribution, again, goes up. So what does this impact does this have? This has a squeeze on profit margins, and certainly coming out of COVID as well, uncertainty as well around the economies, future costs and prices. Try to predict that was quite difficult, and it is getting a bit better as clouds and the smoke of all these challenges slowly clears up. But you've still, from a business perspective, to look ahead as well, very tricky. And then contractual issues as well, because if you've got people in the supply chain, or companies in the supply chain, I should say, having financial challenges as well, what knock-on effect if they go bankrupt or they can't fulfill their financial requirements as well? And then you look at consumer demand and labor as well. Prices go up, then you're going to price people out potentially of buying goods or products. And then from a labor perspective as well, people have experienced their own costs going up, their fixed costs and other costs as well. So they may want wage increase as well. So you've got the spiral effect of this high cost and inflation environment, which has made it very difficult for some businesses, depending on the strength of their balances or capital requirements. They may find it particularly challenging. Sluggish economic growth. So what does that mean? Well, when less money is generally going around, that can affect demand. And then the suppliers in the chain as well. And we talked about potential bankruptcies or financial challenges, and then logistics disruption or challenges. So what does this mean? This can impact transportation of goods, which can put pressure on the prices for freight rates or logistic providers. And then again, if conversely, if economic conditions can improve suddenly, you may get the challenge around keeping up with that demand, which leads to delays potentially, and again, higher costs to try and fulfill that demand. And we've also got on here, I'm not going to take too much longer on this slide, but some of the points are sort of interlinked to a degree. Regulation. So regulations can have potentially both positive and negative impact on supply chains, depending on the specific regulations and how they are implemented. As most people probably on this call presentation are aware, there's a big push for net zero and looking at regulations and how to make sure businesses are adhering to some of the targets that some governments and countries are putting in place for themselves. So regulation, as I said, can help from a standardization perspective, but also if new things are getting implemented around carbon or emissions and making sure that you're doing things in line with what basically legislation allows you to do so, then you need to be keeping up pace around the regulation and making sure you're implementing what needs to be implemented and you're adhering to what governments and standards are expecting for you. So again, the regulation piece probably shows no signs of going away. And then to throw into that, depending on where geographically your business is based, you've got trade regulation and tariffs. So clearly, if you're in the UK or EEA area, as you know, as we come out of Brexit as well, sort of looking at new measures being put in place and new legislation and red tape and areas changing, you need to make sure your business is keeping up with those changes and looking ahead to potential changes around regulations and how any customs or import or export controls may impact your business. So while regulations can introduce some compliance burdens for businesses and costs, it can also include, on the positive side, some fairness, sustainability, and transparency as well within the supply chain. But it's just highlighting that regulation, again, depending on what sectors businesses are in, regulations and cost to serve businesses, keeping in line with what you should be doing from a regulation perspective, is really important. Sort of last point in current outlook, and obviously a bit more recent when you look at the last sort of 6 to 12 months, is looking at geopolitical environment. And again, we touched upon the Russia invasion of Ukraine and the impact that it particularly had on natural resources. So, for example, wheat products in that region are used to feed developing nations, and raw materials like palladium and neon, for example, are important components in semiconductors. So Russia's response to the Western support of Ukraine was to cut off energy and gas supplies to Poland and Bulgaria. So this halted shipments of commodities, and this caused price pressures and increases again. So um, President Biden has promised to tap oil reserves and compensation for this. But I think what we found from that war is that it's tangled transportation and logistics, which now face disruption in the Black Sea and Red Sea as air restrictions are in place as well. So you've had a knock-on impact to freight and transportation, which has meant rerouting. So basically, routes taking longer than they should do. So that affects delivery times and more cost, more fuel. So a lot of these areas, and the reason why the current outlook, particularly COVID and the sort of Red Sea area, is you look at the supply chain, and when one thing is affected, it can affect the front of the supply chain and the end user. And just very quickly on the Red Sea, and again, what's the impact of the Red Sea been? Well, we've had an increase in shipping costs, particularly from Asia to Europe, delays in shipping, and I mentioned rerouting, higher insurance premiums and risks. So there'll be some cost there as well, manufacturing delays. And again, the change in shipping routes affects inventory levels as well, and also consumer prices. So some of these areas, when you look at the current outlook, again, it seems like some of the challenges, and some of us are very familiar with some of these, but it's just to highlight some of the ongoing challenges that are in place that has an impact on the supply chain and potentially costs. So just the next couple of slides, just sort of taking again a little bit of a step back, just looking at some stats really. Just I think it's good to look at. Obviously, you're hearing me a lot on this, but just to look at some stats. And again, probably doesn't tell us anything surprising, but it just shows just a couple of sort of real-time sort of impacts where we're at the moment, and as you look ahead, we look in supply chain. So the next couple of slides are taken from the Transport Intelligence website, and the first one looks at freight and shipping. So needless to say, freight and shipping and integral components of the supply chain, helping facilitate movement of goods across various stages from production, distribution, and ultimately get goods from A to B. The first graph shows freight forwarding, not surprisingly, showing a sharp drop in the market size during the COVID years, then a sharp rise. Again, that supply demand post-COVID, things reopening, lockdowns becoming a thing of the past, and you get that surge in demand. So whilst there was a major rebound post-COVID, other global challenges that we covered in the previous slide had led to dips, and the projection is for growth again at the back end of this year, or more likely the next 18 to 24 months. Confidence. So we can see in the market size, looking at the freight shipping side. The next chart, or this current chart, shows current confidence levels within the ocean freight industry. So again, there's been signs of increased confidence. Sadly, this has been eroded due to unfortunate global conflicts. And again, none of us on this call ever want any of these things clearly to take place, whether it's within the Middle East or Russia and Ukraine, but unfortunately they have been. But again, there's an impact there. So it's been challenging to get momentum due to some of these current setbacks. So there's a knock-on effect to many of the issues I cite in the current outlook. And again, my general sort of view would be is that we are living in a more, as the slide sort of header title shows, we're living in a more uncertain world. Clearly, we don't have a crystal ball, but you just need to try and prepare your business for what is going on at the moment. But obviously, what's as we look ahead, some of the things, but some of these, unfortunately, some of these simmering tensions are not likely to go away anytime soon. So then we're coming on to, I suppose, like one of the interesting slides here. And again, I probably not going to delve into loads and loads of detail around these, but this is where I think like the interesting areas as we look today. So I've sort of titled it supply chain facing challenges, but I guess it's, as we mentioned, there's such a knock-on effect to efficiency and cost when you look at supply chain. So this slide is really to look at supply chain wherever you are in the process, and just some like tips or areas it may help your business, whether you're startup, scale up, or even more mature, as you look to place yourself in a position where you can grow this year and you can look at the next few years with confidence. And again, we've covered a lot around the challenges for businesses over the past few years and why supply chain management is so important. And I put together just these areas about what may help your business, again, depending on what stage you're at. So, firstly, it's conducting a full review of the current supply chain. And this can provide some benefits by doing this review piece. And I found over the years, people get increasingly busier and busier, and businesses or founders or CEOs taking that step back or reflective piece does happen occasionally, but until push comes to shove, doesn't probably happen as frequently enough. So again, it's looking at SWOT analysis, identifying weaknesses and bottlenecks. Reviewing the supply chain allows you to look at those weaknesses or inefficiencies in current processes. This could include, for example, long lead times, excess inventory levels, unreliable suppliers, or inefficient transportation routes. And again, a big part of this is looking at your cost, and we'll come on to the important part of data as well. But it's also looking at your customer service. Clearly, if you're not getting things delivered quickly enough, and if you can control some of that, then the customer service aspect is quite important. It's getting things obviously in good condition at speedily time. So, are you speaking to your current customers as well around that, and are they happy with what's being received? And it's mitigating risk within all this. So again, how can you mitigate risk depending on suppliers? Are you relying upon too many or too little? Can you diversify there? And can you potentially increase the diversification that can allow you more bargaining tools as well? And clearly having more options sometimes can put you in a more powerful position. Kind of fits into point number one is ongoing risk monitoring. Again, this shouldn't be a one-off task. We live in a continuously changing world. We touched around the regulations piece and how that's continually moving and how you need to adapt to keep pace. So it's important that this risk function that's continually getting reviewed, and you are looking ahead to early identify any risks so you can deal them before they simmer and get potentially too big, and be as responsive as possible. And a big part of this is the data side. You can't improve necessarily if you can't measure. So throughout the supply chain or your business, and some of this doesn't just necessarily mean to supply chain, it's general business rules that you want to be data driven in your approach. It's important that business has access to data. So not just in terms of costs or return on investment, but in terms of capital or supplier contacts or inventory as well. And the whole premise of this webinar is managing costs efficiently and effectively, but you fundamentally will struggle to do that as efficiently as you could without regular and up-to-date data across your business. The next point, and I could spend a lot of time in this one, and probably with those in a keen eye, there's been so much buzz and hype around AI in particular and technology. And what place can this take? How can this help your business potentially automate certain tasks or processes, or even provide finance tool, going back to the data piece? And AI and efficiency, just to cover it off here, there's massive benefits potentially of automation and AI and embracing including tech. And this doesn't always need to cost a lot of money, but the benefits are potentially significant. So from improving efficiency, visibility across the supply chain, optimizing your inventory as well. So AI potentially can make you look at historical data, historical trends, look at your costs going out there and having that in real time. And it helps you not just to look back, but to forecast ahead. And if you can forecast ahead from a cash management position, you're probably going to be able to budget more effectively. And that can help other stakeholders, whether it's external or internally, your wider management group. Faster order fulfillment as well. Automation and AI can help you expedite order processing and fulfillment, reducing your lead time, so getting your product potentially quicker to market, which means you've got more buyers, more cash coming in from a revenue perspective. And there's also the benefits around enhanced collaboration. So could you, within the supply chain, have more real-time reporting that helps manufacturers, distributors, customers? That can be massive benefits there. And again, this may not be relevant for a lot of businesses, but we talked about diversification earlier on. Again, you're looking at geopolitical risks there. We know those are taking place, where they're likely to take longer. We know there's some trade discussions, and hopefully we don't get into global trade wars. But look at your business and where you're exposed to some of these risks. And again, I appreciate you may not be able to control or have influence about where you shift globally. However, just be aware and look at maybe pivoting if you can. Just quickly, last couple of points. We look at long-term partnerships. So what do we mean by that? It can take a few different realms. So when we say long-term partners, that could help you look at your supplier contracts. Can you renegotiate supplier contracts? What relations have you got in place? What term contracts have you got? And again, some of these points kind of have an impact across each other. But clearly, if you can look at the terms that you've got in place with your suppliers, and do that review and just again look ahead and say, can I diversify my supplier mix of suppliers and whoever else you're using in the supply chain? If you can obviously negotiate better financial terms, then obviously from a cost perspective, you could position yourself more favorably. And I'm obviously an area which I have focused a lot on the years. We're going to look at the next couple of slides around currency costs, risk management, and strategy as well. So again, if you're a business that's internationally trading and you have got currency costs as part of that, then you want to obviously minimize or try and eliminate as much of that risk as possible. And there can be worth looking or exploring currency strategies as well, so you manage any exchange rate fluctuations. And just to put it in perspective here, I put a graph on looking at the pound and US dollar over the period of the last sort of 12 months or so. And again, the whole purpose behind this slide is, again, when you're looking at currency costs and risk management. So if you are a business involved in the supply chain and you've got need to pay suppliers or you receive payment from suppliers, the whole point here of this slide is to show regardless and irrelevant of currency, so whether it's pound, US dollars, could be Hong Kong dollars, could be Australian dollars, the currency pair is kind of irrelevant to a degree. The point is that exchange rates are moving every second of the day whilst financial markets are open. So this affects the cost of those currency payments and value. So if you are a business that's internationally trading, it's really important, again, you try and manage these costs so you are not affecting your margins and your currency impact due to the sheer fact that the exchange rate is moving, because they said that will have an impact on your bottom line. And then we'll come on to some tips around there. And again, historically, I've focused a lot on this throughout my professional career, is that the reason why cash, currency cost and risk management is really, really important is then, again, from a business perspective, it affects cash flow and profitability. Currency swings will affect their value if you're making these payments or you're receiving them. So it's really important as a business when you're looking ahead is, again, take that reflective historical view, but understand your exposure. What is going on in that currency pair? What is going on the next 12 months that may impact that currency? So for example, if you're looking ahead the next 12 months, global events, you've got obviously simmering wars taking place, you've got low inflation coming into place or changing inflation, and you've also got elections taking place. So we've got a lot of elections, UK, US taking place this year. These type of events and data have impacts on currency and financial markets. So you want to get an understanding of your exposure and what could happen. And again, there's no crystal ball like life. There's no crystal ball here, but you can take a view on what's going on and just making sure you're planning your business to reduce any currency costs and exposure you may have to some currencies. And also, can you diversify as well? Are you just siloed into a couple of currency pairs? Can you potentially look at a overall approach to take risk out of just being dependent on one currency pair, for example? And there's different options, which I won't necessarily talk about in a lot of detail today, but happy to cover a future point around hedging to reduce risk. So you can lock into exchange rate contracts. So there is contracts such as forward contracts, which allows you to fix the exchange rate for a period of time, but that gives you certainty around your currency exposure instead of potentially falling foul if the exchange rate moves adversely, but also helps you take advantage if there's favorable movements in the exchange rate. It's always your business's decision what you do, but it is worth taking information around what's going on in the market and getting a feel for the current cost of making payments and costs that could the changing costs as well. And it's always good speaking to experts. So there is currency specialists out there that focus in these areas. Have a chat with them directly, and they will help you and try and just provide you a bit more information and tools so you can efficiently manage your currency payments. So again, I've tried not to go on for too long today. Again, it's meant to provide just an overview, these type of presentations. But in summary, a lot of supply chain and the facets that go into it, small issues can significantly impact your business margins. Data measurement's key, because without that, you don't know what's going on from a cost perspective. And when you're looking at suppliers and inventory, it's really important that data measurement regularly. Utilize technology. Okay, there's a lot of talk about it, and there's still a lot to be come out around AI and even regulation. But there is technology out there which can allow you to automate or improve processes, save time on administrative tasks, so you can allow to spend time in other areas that can help you grow your business. And as the title of this suggests, we live in an increasingly uncertain world. You want to just try and position your business and navigate all the things that you need to do with more confidence. And again, throughout that process, try and use experts for qualified information. And if you don't ask, then you're potentially not going to be aware of things that can help you on your business growth journey. Well, that's enough from me today around the presentation and slides. I hope you found that industry. I'm just going to stop sharing now and happy to sort of answer any initial questions, or you can contact me directly at any point.
Thank you so much for that, Mr. John. So, for that through and enlightening presentation that you will do today, we will now move to the question and answer segment. So I will encourage everyone to submit their question using the Q&A feature or the chat box on the left side of this your screen, and I will select several questions for John to address it live. And this is a great opportunity to gain deeper insights for his extensive experience. So I encourage everyone to participate actively. And but before that, wanted to have an announcement. As we begin to wrap up today's session, I want to highlight a few important things. Well, this session has been recorded and will be accessible on the ITC YouTube channel for future reference. If there's someone here attend late or didn't watch the first lesson of Mr. John, you can definitely watch this the recording of this into ITC YouTube channel. And aside from that, for those who are not yet a member of the ITC, participation today qualifies you for a free membership to the International Trade Council. This is a wonderful opportunity to engage further with our global community. And lastly, as a token of our appreciation, all of the participants will receive a certificate of participation. Please watch for an email with details on how to claim your certificate. So let me check if there's a question. Okay, so I have a question here from Mr. Aditya Roy. To what extent do you feel a company can utilize branding to protect itself from the uncertainties of the supply chain?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I think again, I sort of alluded to on the talk. I think depending on businesses and what sectors and what stage you're at as well in the supply chain, what part you've got to play from a shipper to a manufacturer, I think sometimes you can delve into a bit more detail. But in terms of some of the areas I talked, it said in terms of uncertainties within that supply chain itself, I think a few key themes come up in terms of diversification. So how many suppliers within the supply chain are you relying on? How many regions are you sourcing from? How many alternative transportation routes or options have you got? Because it's the classic, if the more options you've got, then potentially less exposed to any risks if there's a problem in a region, or if one of your suppliers experiences challenges. Again, if you've got more options in those fields or those areas, then you're perhaps potentially going to position yourself to a stronger place. So it comes into that that sort of review piece, that risk assessment and monitoring, which shouldn't be a one-off task, which should be ongoing, because you want to make sure your business is in a strong position today, but as you look ahead as well. And I think as well, the technology adoption and regulation piece, there is a interlinkage there to an extent. I think technology, people, there's an assumption there that there's always a cost to adapting tech. And don't get me wrong, some technology does incur a cost, but some necessarily doesn't. There's a lot of free tools and resources out there that I would encourage people to chat up. Even ChatGPT in its basic form can help with some copy or ideas around structure and processes. So I encourage people to do that. But that review piece and ongoing risk monitoring matrix really needs to take place. And as I said, feel free to reach out and speak to experts, because if you are, there's a lot of people with experience around growing businesses as well, who are more than happy to share initially from a consultation perspective, just some free information, and then you can kind of go from there.
Thank you so much for that, Mr. John. So let me check if there is any other question. So as of now, it seems that there's no one wanted to ask a question. So we still have 40 or 29, or I'm sorry, 19 minutes before this end. So if there's anyone, so Mr. Aditya Heroy says thank you for your answer. So if there's anyone wanted to ask a question, you can definitely leave your questions here on the chat box. And but before that, Mr. John, um if there's anyone wanted to connect with you, can you please leave your email address here on the chat box as well?
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you so much. Okay, thank you so much for that. So I will display this one on the screen. So if there's anyone wanted to connect with Mr. John about this topic, you can definitely send him an email to email on the screen right now. And I will also provide my email address here on the chat box. For those who not yet a member of the ITC, you can definitely send to me an email. So I guess there's no other question from everyone. So thank you once again, Mr. John, for sharing your invaluable insights today, and your expertise has greatly enriched our understanding. And a heartfelt thank you to all of our participants for your active engagement and thoughtful questions. Your contribution have greatly enhanced today's discussion. Please keep an eye on your email for follow-up information, including how to claim your participation certificate as we conclude. I wish everyone a wonderful afternoon and look forward to welcoming you back to our future webinars. Thank you and goodbye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much, Mr. John. Have a good one.